Hello, everybody. My name is Bruce Montgomery, and this is my colleague, Tracy Priest.
Hello, everybody.
And we're with The Road to Retail. On our podcast, Tracy and I hope to offer tips, insights, ideas, and examples for how small, emerging, and challenger CPG, consumer packaged goods, brands can build their business. Everything from determining if you're ready to grow, where to start, how to prove it online, how to go about securing distribution at a national retailer, driving your business with the end consumer, and how to go about finding an investor if that's important to you. The bottom line is, we would love to help you be successful by highlighting the many important factors that go into establishing and growing your brand.
Bruce and I have been working in CPG commercial operations for over 30 years, working on brands of all sizes. By commercial operations, we mean sales, marketing, trade marketing, new product development, broker and distributor management, new product development, brand M&A, and financing. As a part of our show, we bring our guests that are brand founders and leaders, agencies, Amazon specialists, sales agents, contract manufacturers, retailers, and investors to discuss their experiences and share their insights with the audience.
To keep up with the show, please subscribe to the Road to Retail podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or YouTube. Leave us a review and consider sharing the show with a friend or colleague that may benefit from the content. You can also check out our website to learn more at www.road2retail.com and follow The Road to Retail on LinkedIn. We would love to have you along for the ride.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the most recent episode of Road to Retail. Bruce, great to see you today. How are you doing, buddy?
Tracy, how are you? We've seen a lot of each other this week.
It was great spending 3 days together this week, Bruce. So tell us about where we were and what we were doing.
Yeah, no, thanks, Trace. So this week, we were fortunate enough to attend the annual Self-Care Leadership Summit, which we'll refer to throughout this show as the SLS of the Consumer Healthcare Products Association, also known as CHPA. Folks, that's the end of the acronyms, I hope. But it's a great event that brings together all the leaders in the self-care industry. So think vitamins, think personal care, think OTC medicines. And I've been very lucky throughout the majority of my career to be associated with this organization. And they provide great service to representing all the companies within this industry. And we'll talk about that in a second. But before we get started, we want to thank and recognize Scott Melville is their CEO. And if he ever wants to leave being CEO, he can get into interviewing, which Tracy will talk about in a little while. Beth Allgaier, she's the SVP of Business Development. And by the time we're done, if anyone has an interest in renewing or joining, which I would highly encourage this organization, reach out to Beth. Mike Tringale and Logan Tucker were also very helpful to Tracy and I getting down there for this week. So a great organization that always puts on a great show. So before we roll into the specifics, I just want to talk a tiny bit more about CHPA. So the goal of the organization really, in my words, they have a great website, chpa.org. It can give the formal, but what they do is they help represent the industry in terms of policy. They keep everyone abreast of issues that are confronting the industry, good and bad. They try to keep an open door so that the industry can continue to innovate. They have a very talented staff. So especially if you're a smaller firm, you can reach out and, get some direction on whether it's a vendor for ingredients or research or et cetera. Or if you're having regulatory matters, they have a talented staff. And, the move toward self-care is only going to increase as time goes on. There's more and more products available. There's more and more innovation. People are taking more and more interest in their healthcare and trying to solve some problems themselves with the enhanced access to data and information, whether it's your iPhone or Android phone in your pocket, or what you can learn out on Amazon or sites that, we'll go to. We're parents, so we have kids. So occasionally you'll pop out to WebMD, or you'll go to like mayoclinic.com and, diagnose that you've got some hideous disease when really you just have a cold. But self-care is going to continue to be of growing importance in the country. So just a little bit more, and then we'll get into the specifics. So CHPA covers the topical issues confronting the industry. They're really good about doing recaps on the state of the business and the industry, whether that's retailers or trends of digital, et cetera. We're going to talk about that. They also offered a list at this of highly credentialed speakers. So whether it's trends in M&A, some things going on in policy in Washington, D.C., talking about ingredients testing, they really bring in some big hitters there to be helpful. And then the other great thing about these types of meetings, regardless of the industry, but again, I'm biased to this one, it brings together all the leaders and many of the people that support the industry in one place. So whether that's networking or beginning to the process of trying to strike working arrangements, whether that's an M&A deal, which is always the sexy one, or finding someone else to help you with research or finding a backup supplier. It's just a great organization full of great people. Again, I'm biased and I'm not ashamed to be so. Tracy?
Absolutely. So one of the things that they talked about, kind of a recap of the CHPA business. So they talked about what they do on behalf of their members. So talking about policies, current actions on the Hill, and then what are the issues confronting the industry. So they're very active within the industry, helping their members.
Yeah, and I touched on a few of the other priorities. And if Tracy and I refer to our notes more than usual today, we apologize, but it was so packed with info, we don't want to get things wrong. So some of the other priorities are growth, working toward clearing a path for innovation in the industry. I mentioned that. Access is big, working to make sure self-care products are available for all populations. And then quality, working to ensure the quality of the products that are coming to market, whether that's ingredients, helping people with claims, et cetera, but helping companies make sure that we maintain an industry reputation of high integrity. That's very important to everyone I've ever met that works in this industry. There's very few gunslingers, and then there shouldn't be when you're dealing with people's health and wellness. Tracy?
Yeah, absolutely. So CEO Scott Melville also talked about their initiative of making America healthy again. So we talked about empowering Americans through transparency, prioritizing gold standard research, working with farmers, and then also ensure expanded options and flexibility. So those are some of the focus points about making America healthy again.
And who doesn't want America healthy, Tracy?
That's right.
So now we're going to get into some of the different speakers and hit on the high notes. So Circana, which is the rebranded IRI, they made a really great presentation kind of talking about the state of the industry and some of the trends they saw emerging. So unit growth was up again, we're largely talking health and wellness, self-care products. Okay, we're not talking about Liquid Tide or Matchbox cars, but unit growth in our industry was up in 2024 for the first time in a while. No surprise, but they validated, e-com is leading the growth of the various categories and platforms, and chain drug is declining. Again, no surprise to those paying attention. There's been a lot of press of the struggles of some of the larger chain drug operations. As someone who's been in the industry a long time, I hope they get it figured out, because again, when it comes back to consumers having choice, it's always better for competition when there's many healthy competitors.
Right.
Oh yeah, I'm sorry. One more. Some of the high growth areas that they noted were GI, nutritional supplements, skincare, and oral care. Interestingly about GI, it was coming in several segments, but for those of you paying close attention, with more and more people on the GLP-1s, which we're going to touch on a couple of times, side effects there are GI related. So it's really no surprise, as more people go on GLP-1s, they may have need for more GI products. Sorry about that, Trace.
No problem. So they also talked about some consumer trends, which we thought were really fascinating. Some highlights were consumers are focused on holistic well-being. So it's mind, body, and soul. And a lot of the growth is being fueled by the intersection of beauty and wellness. So beauty inside and out, which I thought was really fascinating. And then Americans are focused on reducing stress and improving sleep. Those are the two biggest, I think, places that consumers are focused. And then also, I'll just take this one, Bruce, that healthcare brands are outpacing private label except in drug. If you want to.
Yeah, and one of the interesting points there was they specifically called out the growth of whole body deodorants like Lume and other high-end deodorants that have anti-sweat products like Carpe have really come on the scene in these last couple of years and carved out nice businesses that have also not only served consumers, but also have helped retailers drive their category. So Tracy, tell us the difference between a trend and a fad, man.
Absolutely. This was another fascinating topic that they covered at the conference, and that is, as Bruce said, what's the difference between a trend and a fad? So a trend offers purpose with a meaningful point of difference. And Bruce and I talk a lot about this on the show. Our guests talk about that, how important having a point of difference in your product is. And then also a trend evolves and expands over time. A trend also has long-term growth and sustained adoption. A trend also creates a change in consumer behavior. So example of a trend are probiotics, women's health, gut health, high protein products, sleep products, and note globally also sensitive skin products. So the question today that I want our audience to ask today is, which are you? Are you riding a trend or are you riding a fad? So I thought that was really a great question to ask yourself as we move on to our next topic.
Yeah, one of the other things about sleep that they pointed out was it was, worrying about sleep, but beyond medicine. So this wasn't drug or melatonin. It's some of the different sleeping devices and wearables to tell you the quality of your sleep, the depth of your sleep, et cetera. So we're going to touch on that again in a bit too. Another topic that they touched on was the comment that the path to purchase is no longer linear. And for any of you out there in commercial operations, sales, marketing, product development, et cetera, no kidding. It is definitely not linear. You can get intercepted at any point. It's not just winning at the last 3 feet in a retail aisle anymore. There's a lot more exits off this road to retail right now, pun intended. They also pointed out that the movable middles of the population are the folks that are most susceptible, if that was the right word, or can be influenced by your advertising and promotion. So up to between 20 and 80% of all category purchases are done by these movable middle folks. So for the old brand managers out there, these are also in my vernacular, these are the brand switchers. So if you have a brand of juice, maybe they're buying your juice, but if yours isn't available or isn't on sale, they're buying this one. Or if they've seen an ad or gotten served up an infomercial or something on TikTok about that juice, they may try this one the next time. And they also talked about not all creative is created equally, and that's true. So we tried to keep the math to a minimum, but here's some numbers that you might find interesting. They were talking about the ROIs of various advertising vehicles. So real quick, paid social had an index of 126. That was the highest. Digital display was 117. Paid search 115. Online video was 100. And linear TV was 93, 94. Now, what was interesting about linear TV is even though the index isn't over 100, it still has huge audiences. So if you want to get awareness out there quickly and really drive some impressions, linear TV is still tough to beat. Now they had some predictions. Connected TV will take over linear TV ad spend by 2028. 25% of ad dollars will be spent on retailer media networks by 2028. Tracy and I have had several guests on talking about that. It's becoming table stakes for new distribution in brick and mortar. And one of the reasons all these retailer media networks have come to be is that for years they saw Amazon's ad platform growing at 70% a year with 70% margins, and the rational man and woman said, "Hey, I want some of that."
Sure.
And so they've been building them out. People are aware of Walmart Connect and Target with Roundel and CMX with CVS, Walgreens Advertising Group, and on and on. That's all that was there, but I thought it was interesting that they offered those ROIs. Tracy, take us to Harvard.
Yeah, absolutely. But those are great trends, and hopefully our audience is enjoying some of these ROIs and predictions that were outlined. So the next presenter was Professor Joe Fuller as Bruce mentioned, from Harvard, and he talked about the role of AI. Obviously, a very hot topic within the industry and globally as well. So Joe talked a little bit about how companies are really trying to understand the best way to utilize AI and determine which jobs will be potentially impacted. We don't know yet because we're just on the cusp of this new technology. And then also is if you're a job candidate and you've got AI credentials and experience, you can really pave your way compensation wise. So companies are looking for people with that kind of experience. And then Professor Fuller also talked about the fact that those with the most data that and can use it are going to win the fastest. So as AI gets going, the more it learns and the better it gets. So if you can fuel your AI with that data, you're going to win. And then also right now, because it's still in its early stages, companies are not enjoying the success that they thought that they would with AI experiments. But as Professor Fuller says, he expects that to change very much in the near future. Bruce,
Yeah, he was a super interesting fellow.
yes.
And I'm sure if anyone wants to reach out to him, he also mentioned that he had a consulting background. So I'm sure he accepts inbound inquiries
Sure.
to learn more directly from him. The next set of speakers was a very interesting CEO panel. And the three CEOs that were put up there were Ron Lombardi of Prestige Brands, Tiffany McLaud of Ultima, it's a hydration drink, excellent drink, and Greg Bradley of Foundation Brands. And they talked about some trends, and then Tracy and I took some notes. So I'll talk about the trends, not fads, trends. Mm-hmm. And the first one they said, look, healthy wellness and happiness are a trend. People want to be healthy. They want to take care of themselves. And they're also looking for ways to kind of drive happiness. Earlier in the day, someone put up the Calm app and played like some rainstorm for 30 seconds. I had to wake Tracy up. He was so calm after the 30 seconds. But these are the kinds of things that in the old days you wouldn't have associated with health and wellness. I mean, happiness, it's like, come on, that's something different. They also talked about the access to information has helped consumers gain confidence in administering their own self-care. We kind of made a joke about, Googling Mayo Clinic and, you come down with yellow fever, even though you live in Charlottesville, Virginia. So odds of that are pretty low. But people can now find out, what can I do to get more vitamin D? What do they recommend for diaper rash for a baby? All these things where you used to maybe have to go into the pharmacy and talk to a pharmacist, or, call a friend, or, go read something in a brutal book. It's now one Google search or Chat GPT question away, and people feel like they're getting quality information. Tracy, what notes did you take on this?
Yeah, one of the things that I wanted to add here is the phrase that was mentioned is health is wealth. And I thought that was really insightful, and I think that's what really consumers are figuring out.
But I'm sorry, Tracy, one other thing before we press on is AI prompting has really helped Ultima grow. And I thought that was a great example of Tiffany specifically talking about how AI has helped her business. And again, a lot of their business is online. And, I'm certainly no AI expert, but from everything you read and that I've heard, AI is one thing, and these chat GPTs, et cetera, Gronk, Copilot, it's the quality of the prompts which lead to the quality of the answers. So if I just said, what's a good brand for hydration? I might get back a bunch of things. But if you say, what's a low sugar solution for hydration? What's a natural solution to hydration? So the more specific your prompt, the more accurate the answer if you know exactly what you're looking for. Sorry, Tracy.
No, that's a great insight. Thanks for sharing that, Bruce. So a couple of notes on this section on this panel, which again, these were super insightful and very well-spoken people. But a couple notes. One is Ultima started in the natural channel, and 50% of their business is direct to consumer. Foundation is a digital first marketing agency, but not necessarily digital first. And then they talked about tariffs, which it was definitely a big topic of conversation on everybody's mind. And that's just going to be another expense to manage. So those were a couple of notes that, that I took from this section as well.
Yeah. One point of clarity on the foundation comment is they said they're digital first in their marketing efforts, putting pressure against the consumer to make people aware of their brands and trying to reach consumers where they are. But they're not necessarily digital first in where the transaction takes place. They don't care if you buy it on Amazon or directly from a DTC website or at Walmart, Target, fill in the blank. But I thought that was interesting. They're kind of agnostic as to where the purchase takes place, but in order to reach the right consumers, they believe in a digital marketing first approach. The next speaker is a group called Eurofins, and they do a lot of product testing. I've worked with them in the past, and I would do a great injustice trying to explain their services, but I can tell you this. We've worked with them many times at places I've worked, and the work has always been top shelf. So if you need product or ingredient testing from a third party, they are well worth the phone call.
And one thing I wanted to add there, and I've worked with them as well. And when you're working in vitamins and supplements, that is a requirement by CVS that your products are tested by Eurofins. So just a little side note there. That's how I know them. And again, my experience has also been tremendous and very professional. So let's move on to the next topic. So this was a talk given by Let There Be, which is a healthcare video marketing company. And the topic was empowering brands to be bold with their message. So they really talked about, working with your medical, legal, and regulatory groups to talk about the claims that you can and can't make. And they had a really good, little snippet that said bad science is really claiming too much. And I thought that was really insightful. And good science sometimes are things that you just can't really talk about. So I thought that was really quite interesting. Bruce, your comment?
Yeah. Thank you. So an example of good science might be you have a claim you believe your product can make, but the way your clinical study was structured, you did not design it in such a manner that you're allowed to make the claim. So as weird as that is, that's why there are rules, folks. So we're going to talk about that right here. So another thing that these guys talked about, which I found very interesting, growing up in the brand management world and all of commercial operations, sometimes you think your medical, legal, regulatory, which this group referred to as MLR, you might joke and call them sales prevention, or I'm going to war with regulatory today. That's really not the way you should think about it. All these folks are there to do a couple of things. Make sure the consumer is protected, number one, and to make sure your company doesn't get in trouble, number two. And if they really don't like you, number three might be keep you out of jail. But let's focus on numbers 1 and 2. So they talked about the key to your advertising substantiation so that you can make the claims and talk about benefits and claims, which really drive health and wellness products. Why is this going to work? Okay. And here's my proof. Make sure you have a claims list. Make sure you understand your product labeling, your indications, use, directions. If you have clinical studies, if you have proprietary consumer research, insights, or surveys, are you an NDA product, meaning you were at one time prescription, or you monograph all categories in OTC. Most of them are under a monograph, which are kind of like, those are the rules, folks. This is what you're allowed to say. These are the ingredients under these monographs. They talked about the importance of, does everyone in your company that needs to know where these pieces of data are? That's a good question, because I've worked at places where this department had that department had this, and it was basically, like finding a needle in a haystack to pull it all together into one place. And they also talked about building trust with the MLR folks in your organization. They're not your enemy. They're your colleagues. Okay. So give them a heads up. Hey, here's what we're working on. So they said, here's what's coming, and then explain, here's why this matters, and this is why we think it can be helpful. Ask for initial guidance and feedback. You're not asking them for approval or denial. You're asking them for some feedback. It might be like, hey, Bruce, that's really interesting, but where's that proof of the survey that you guys did 6 months ago? Oh, okay, I can bring that. And then submit your advertising copy with what they called substantial substantiation. So if you think you only need to bring 2 things of proof, bring 4 if you have them. Prove that you have them. Bring the proof, put it on the table, and if possible, always have some backup approaches, whether that's a slight nuance to the language. This does a couple of things. It saves a lot of time, and it saves a lot of frustration, because if you bring only one option, you're asking them to make a binary decision, thumbs up or down, whereas it really might be, we can't say best, but we could say one of the best, So it's just, I thought it was a really good way to explain how to cooperate with these folks. Again, to put it just in Bruce language, these are my colleagues. They're not my adversaries. Okay. We all want the companies to be successful. All right, moving on. Another fascinating discussion was what's going on in the M&A environment in consumer health. And this discussion panel was chaired by Susan Roddy of Perella Weinberg. And the 2 people she had on her panel were Abigail Buckwalter, the CEO of Nestle Health Science, and Mike DeBiasi of Arcadia. I believe Mike went to Notre Dame, where I went. So, of course, I thought Mike's comments were all brilliant. Did I say that out loud? So they talked about the lessons learned in the deals that they've made. And these folks are serial acquirers. And it was interesting to hear the perspective from a big company like Abigail's and one that's getting big like Mike. So lessons learned, they said, hey, invest in attractive categories, no fads. There's that word again. And they talked about a couple of trends that they believe have legs, all kinds of different proteins. And they also said hydration is very real. The second point they said was know exactly what you're going to do with this target brand. Don't get so caught up in deal momentum. Bruce wants to acquire this because he heard his enemy Tracy wants to. Well, what are you going to do with it, Bruce? I don't know. I just know I don't want Tracy to have it. Okay, that's probably not a good approach. Abigail had a really cool point. She said, don't compete with yourself with overlapping brands in the same category. We see this all the time. Okay. All you do is you make your workload a lot more complex, whether it's with retailers or in-house, because if you have 2 hydration products, unless they're very different, suddenly it's like, eventually someone goes, yeah, I have a question. Why do we have 2 hydration products? And then everyone looks at their shoes because no one really knows why. Do your target brands have elasticity to stretch into other categories or launch flanker products? A flanker product is the same brand with a different benefit, or a line extension, which might just be the same benefit, but in a different form, right? Or a different flavor. So do these brands have some legs? Mike had a couple of things in here. Look for brands with strong gross margins. Look for brands with proven efficacy and strong reviews online. I mean, do people like it? Do they use it? Do they trust it? We're going to talk about trust a little later. And can you realistically drive double-digit growth? Maybe you're buying a brand that's been neglected inside a bigger company, or you're buying one from an entrepreneur who just didn't have the resources to really lean into it and drive that expansion. So look at that. They also talked about, hey, man, what have we seen that can go wrong or has gone wrong over time that we've learned from? And the first comment, which I believe came from Abigail, was, man, sometimes the business case is just too aggressive. The key is always under promise, over deliver. Don't over promise and under deliver. That leads to some uncomfortable discussions. And then also recognize that there's not really a cookie cutter. An approach that worked once with one brand in one category may not work again with a different brand in a different category. Transactions are not linear. You make great progress, then there's a fallback. And you also, both of them said, you kind of have to take into account the culture. If you're acquiring a whole company and you're going to bring these people in, if the culture is really different, that can be a challenge. Or if you're just going to try to take a brand and put it into your company, if it's been a very purpose-driven brand and you bring it into a bigger company and suddenly the purpose isn't front and center or the purpose gets abandoned, that's not what attracted the consumers to the brand. They liked that it was organic or that it supported farmers. Speed sometimes can work against you if you're not careful. Be careful there. Qualitative and quantitative inputs both matter. And again, that's kind of getting back to culture. So sometimes the softer stuff can make or break you. And then lastly, excuse me, some of the other things that can go wrong are kind of logical, but worth saying. IT conversions can be a mess. Cutovers on UPC code, supply chain integrations or interruptions, getting employees that you want to keep under contract and on board. And that was all I had, Tracy. Did I think? Oh, they also talked about one way to acquire a target brand while trying to stay out of a big process or auction is build relationships and trust through organizations like CHPA, where you meet people for years and you can start talking to them. Or if you see a little brand you really like, start romancing them years in advance. Reach out. Maybe you can help them with a project or something. Don't see something you want and then immediately just attack it. The people, there's examples out there where people have tracked brands for years without making an overture to buy it. But now all of a sudden, Bruce and Tracy are kind of friends and colleagues. They know each other. And if Tracy wants to retire, maybe he'll sell it to Bruce because he knows him.
Absolutely.
Tracy would still want top dollar from Bruce, so let's be clear.
Absolutely.
Tracy, anything to add there? That was a lot.
No, that was a lot, but I thought that was just a great panel of very, very smart people. So I really enjoyed that conversation a lot. So the next speaker was really, really interesting. So it was Margaret Brennan, and she is the Face the Nation on CBS. So she is the person that you see on Sunday mornings, and she talked about the political landscape and what's going on, on the Hill these days. But I just thought it was really just an interesting conversation about her perspective from the media and what's going on with the media these days and with the new administration. So a fascinating conversation, but too much to really get into on today's show. But Margaret was really interesting.
Yeah, no, she was excellent. And it was interesting because she was in the other chair while Scott Melville, CEO of CHPA, asked her the question. So I thought that was kind of funny. So Scott did a good job. So maybe he'll be her backup if she ever, gets
decides to retire.
Yeah, yeah. Tracy, let's talk about the retail landscape.
Yes, so this was the last one of the day, the evolving retail landscape, and they talked a lot about some numbers, which I'm going to share with you, some trends and things like that. So online growth represents 19% of all CPG sold online. So very fascinating. Obviously, no surprise to our audience. And of that, HBA, health and beauty, is 46% of that growth. Again, probably not surprising to our audience. And also self-care, which was really the focus of the conference this year, is 40% of that growth. Another trend was that the drug class of trade has lost 50% of their business gains from the last 16 years in 12 months. So as we've mentioned earlier in the show, the drug class of trade is still trying to find some of its footing. And then the other trend is 90% of product searches on Amazon do not contain a brand. So that was really interesting. And consumers are really using Amazon to search and to learn about products first, and then going to the brand's website or buying it on Amazon or going into a retail outlet. And then 1/3 of self-care sales on Amazon are subscribe and save. Again, a great insight to our audience today about if you're not doing a subscription based on your Amazon, definitely something to think about. So Bruce, what else did you learn about?
Yeah, one other thing there. I thought the interesting thing that Tracy just touched on was that the 90% of searches on Amazon, they're unbranded. So people are searching by need state, or they're not saying, "Hey, can I get some Tylenol?" Most of them, it's like, "What's a good headache medicine?" or
Or I
"What's a good
can't
fever
sleep.
reducer?"
I
So
can't.
again, that gets back to the trend they talked about right up front, that people are more empowered in their self-care because there's more information and data out there. So that was really interesting. And they kind of wrapped up with some rapid fire bullet points of things they're watching. The whole trend of food as medicine. People are being a lot more careful about what they're putting into their body right from the start. Not that the occasional chalupa will not find its way into your diet, but people are really watching what they're doing. And then the whole GLP-1 phenomenon is really causing retailers and brands to reimagine the opportunities that consumers on these medicines present to them. We have an episode coming up very shortly with Dr. Alexandra Soa, who just wrote the book The Ozempic Revolution. And Dr. Soa is a doctor, obviously, and she has always been focused on weight control and weight loss before it was cool. So she's really studied this in her practice. And, she talks about the side effects, which we'll let her talk about in her episode. But a few of them are a need for protein because of, rapid weight loss and muscle loss. And there's a bunch of GI side effects. So there's nutrients and vitamins you need. There's gut health things you need so that you don't feel bad while you're losing weight and, hopefully feeling better for your long-term health. Other things they talked about was immunity's big, cellular function. Women's health remains a hot area for people to try to dive in and offer more and more solutions across the spectrum of things confronting women and their health. Brain health continues to grow as America ages. There anything anyone could ever do to slow down the deterioration of brain health, I think would be very well received. And then they talked about P4 healthcare, which is really interesting. And these are everything from the health bands and watches. And for those of you that don't know, and I was in this camp, I wasn't exactly sure what P4 meant, but it means predictive, preventative, personalized, and participatory. So think about your Apple Watch or the sleep hoops that you can put around your neck, the Aura rings, all these things are what they're talking about. Then they talked about the importance of loyalty. So loyalty matters. Brands with increasing loyalty over the past 2 years are growing 3.1 times faster than brands with declining loyalty. Seems logical, but I didn't know that the slope would be that extreme. So people that think, not supporting your brands or innovating or continuously communicating about their benefits and attributes, you are wrong because your loyalty is slipping. And that's the fact behind it. They threw out two last things. They talked that retail media growth. They think it's going to grow at 18% CAGR the next 2 years, and that 27 billion will be spent on retail media within that time frame. I hope I captured that number right, but even if I didn't, the number's huge. And a couple of years ago, it was almost zero, with the exception of Amazon. And then lastly, they mentioned a group called Hungry Root, which I believe helps you select healthy meals. What was interesting about the mention of Hungry Root was they said 72% of all items purchased on Hungry Root are selected by the algorithm, and people just say, "Oh, okay." So they're accepting what gets served to them. So again, it probably comes back. I'm not familiar with how to use it, but it probably comes back to the specificity of the prompt you put in. But interesting that the algo is so advanced that 72% of the time people agree with it and they buy. And just a couple of comments before we toss it to Tracy for the big finish. The last speaker of the day was Scott Mitchell, who's the chief merchant of HEB. For those of you who have never been to Texas or live in Texas, it's a incredible chain of grocery stores, unbelievably well run, privately held. I've worked with them for most of my working 30 plus years. Always a pleasure. Negotiate hard, but they're honest. Once you reach an agreement, that's your agreement. Their stores are spectacular and they execute like the Navy SEALs. They are fantastic to work with. And he shared with us some of their strategy, and then they invested the time to take as many people at the CHPA conference as wanted to on a store tour. I've been on various store tours. I did not go on this one because of travel commitments, but when a retailer offers a store tour, take it because you can always learn things. So the last thing I would say, if this has been interesting to you, and if you are a brand in consumer healthcare or self-care or VMS or HBA, and you're a member of CHPA, I hope it's not even a question that you renew. And if you're not, after hearing this, I'd encourage you to reach out to Beth Algier and talk to her about joining, because the mileage that I've gotten out of this group for most of my working career is unbelievable. I had the opportunity to serve on some of their committees. The people you meet, the things you learn, the way you can build the business, it's just well worth the time and the money. Tracy, anything to add there before we go into the big finish?
No, I just wanted to give a big shout out again to the CHPA team for inviting Bruce and I to be a part of this wonderful event. We learned so much from all the speakers and just enjoyed our time in San Antonio and interacting with all the people that attended the conference this week. So
yeah, and you know, the second biggest thing happening in San Antonio soon is the Final Four. The biggest one was the CHPA meeting, and the second biggest will be the men's Final Four.
There you go. There you go. Well, thanks everybody for joining us today. Thanks, Bruce. I think this was a great episode. Please continue to follow us on our Spotify and Apple at Road to Retail. Also, look for this posting tomorrow on our LinkedIn and all our other formats. And also continue to follow us on our new website, which is www.road2retail. So thanks again for joining us. We appreciate it.
Good luck out there, folks.